Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Cohen, when we ended off before the break, I was asking you about Mr. Trump saying something about paying in cash. Why did you think it was a bad idea for Mr. Trump's suggestion that this be paid in cash?
Because we needed to acquire the information, the documents, and I believed that the proper way to do it would be by check and make it appear to be a proper transaction.
Now at the end of the tape it cuts off, and there is a voice that's heard at the end of the tape before it cuts off. Whose voice is that?
It's my voice.
And what do you recall about why that recording cut off that way with your voice?
Because I received an incoming phone call.
And what do you understand you were saying in that last piece when you hear your voice?
Hello, are you there?
Now why did you, when you tried to take that call, you said the incoming call you thought was coming in, did the recording of your conversation with Mr. Trump end at that point?
Yes.
And why did you try to take that call instead of continuing to tape the conversation with Mr. Trump?
I must have believed it was an important phone call.
Was there another reason also that you were comfortable ending the tape?
Yes.
Tell us about that, please.
I didn't want to record more. I already had enough that I would have been able to show David Pecker so as to convince him that he was going to receive the $150,000 back.
Now let's put up, please, for Mr. Cohen, what's in evidence, a page from People's Exhibit 400. The page that's Bates ending 2726, please. Now, Mr. Cohen, have you had a chance to review this record? This AT&T record regarding your call history?
Yes.
And do you recognize it to be an AT&T record of calls to or from your cell phone ending in 0114?
Yes.
Does it appear to show an incoming call at around the time that your recording of Mr. Trump cuts off?
Yes.
And does that record indicate a call at around that time that looks like it came in and perhaps went to voicemail?
It says so, yes.
And do you recall when you tried to pick up that call? Do you recall whether it connected or went to voicemail?
I don't recall.
You can take that down, please.
This video was brought to you by my supporters on Indiegogo. YouTube will not monetize these videos, so I can only afford to keep making them with your support. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, please donate to my Indiegogo campaign so we can finish this trial. You can find the campaign linked at the top of the description or scan the QR code on screen now.
Can we take a look now at a page of what's in evidence as People's Exhibit 263? A page with a Bates ending 69559? Does that appear to be a contact from your phone records? From your phone contacts?
It is.
Have you had a chance to review that against those AT&T records?
I have.
And does that indicate the number or the person who is attached to the number of that incoming call at around the time that the recording cut off?
It does.
And who does that number come back to according to your contacts?
It comes back to Kathy Battle, who is the branch manager over at Capital One Bank.
So it is your understanding that that was the call that came in?
Yes.
Based on the review of these records?
Yes.
You can take that down, thank you. Now, after the audio ended, you ended the audio recording by trying to pick up this call. Did you continue some conversation with Mr. Trump?
Yes.
And what was the gist of the conversation that you continued with Mr. Trump after the recording ended?
I am going to head over to Alan Weiselberg's office, and I will get back to him with more of an update.
So, was there a really substantial conversation after the end of that taped recording?
Yes.
And when you say yes, was it a substantially long conversation?
No, it was not substantial.
And at that point, as you withdrawn, you mentioned that the point of this recording was so that you could convince Mr. Pecker that Mr. Trump had agreed to repay the money?
To appease him that he was going to receive the money back.
Was there any reason to have any real further conversation with Mr. Trump about this at that time?
No.
Now, I am going to ask you to please put up People's 247 also in evidence. Now, Mr. Cohen, this is metadata from your phone regarding the taped. The audio tape of your conversation with Mr. Trump on September 6th of 2016. I want to ask you a question. After you made that audio recording using your phone, did you ever alter that recording?
No.
And is that recording exactly the same as the day that you made it on September 6th of 2016?
Yes.
You can take that down, thank you. Now, I want to go back to your conversation with Mr. Trump on that audio recording where you mentioned having spoken with Alan Weiselberg about setting this whole thing up. Do you remember that?
I do.
I just want to go back to you. Was it typical for you to discuss financial matters with Alan Weiselberg?
It was typical, too, for everybody to discuss financial matters with Alan Weiselberg.
And that was why?
Because he was the chief financial officer of the company and was a long-serving, loyal employee to Mr. Trump.
And so was Mr. Weiselberg, to your knowledge, in charge of the finance and accounting functions at the Trump Organization?
Yes, one additional thing.
Yes, sir.
It was also because Mr. Trump would direct me to go speak to Mr. Weiselberg.
Was that unusual either?
No.
To direct you to speak to Mr. Weiselberg about financial transactions?
No.
To your understanding, did Mr. Weiselberg report directly to Mr. Trump at the Trump Organization?
Yes.
And I think you said Mr. Weiselberg was a long-standing executive employee there for many years.
Yes, ma'am.
Where was Mr. Weiselberg's office located in relation to Mr. Trump's office?
Also on the 26th floor, towards the back?
Whose office was closer to Mr. Trump's? Yours or Mr. Weiselberg's?
Well, initially it would have been pretty similar, but the second office that I moved into, I was.
What was your relationship like with Mr. Weiselberg at the time?
It was very good.
And did you observe how frequently Mr. Weiselberg interacted with Mr. Trump?
Yes.
And what did you observe?
It was a regular basis.
And from your experience working at the Trump Organization, would a deal of this magnitude, a $150,000 deal, have been done at the Trump Organization without Alan Weiselberg?
Objection.
Overruled.
No, not. It wasn't even a deal of this magnitude. It was any deal would end up going through Alan. Alan handled all the finances coming in and out.
Can you describe generally the conversation you had with Mr. Weiselberg about the McDougall transaction?
So I went to Alan's office. I expressed to him that we need funding of $150,000 to consummate this transaction. Alan then said to me, well, if we do it from a Trump entity, that kind of defeats the purpose because the point is not to have the Trump name affiliated to this at all. It's really to create a barrier. And so he asked me to think about ways that we could raise the $150,000.
Before we get to that for a moment, in terms of opening up a separate LLC to handle it, did you have a conversation with Mr. Alan Weiselberg about that?
Objection.
You can answer.
No, I just told him I was going to open up a LLC.
Was there a discussion about doing that to make it more difficult to track directly to either Mr. Trump or the Trump Organization?
It was in order to keep it separate.
And approximately how many conversations do you think you had with Mr. Weiselberg about the McDougall transaction?
Maybe 10, 12.
Now, did there come a time that you had some conversations and began working with someone named Daniel Rothstein associated with AMI in terms of effectuating this transfer of the rights from AMI to an LLC?
Yes.
And who was Daniel Rothstein, to your knowledge?
He's an employee over at AMI.
And by the way, you had Mr. Rothstein's contact in your phone as well?
Yes.
And did you communicate with him by phone?
I did.
And by email?
Yes.
Did you also on some occasions communicate with him by encrypted applications?
I believe so.
And why did you do that with him?
In order to keep the matter secret.
So let's show now, please, just to the witness, the court and counsel, People's Exhibit 209 for identification. Do you recognize that document on your screen, sir?
I do.
What do you recognize it to be?
This is a communication from Daniel Rothstein to me by encrypted app signal.
Are those a variety of communications over a number of days with Mr. Rothstein?
Yes.
By encrypted app signal?
Yes.
Is this an exact copy of those communications between yourself and Mr. Rothstein, using that encrypted app on the dates that are reflected in this record?
Yes, ma'am.
I offer People's Exhibit 209 in evidence.
No objection.
Accepted into evidence.
Thank you. Let me direct your attention to the first. Sorry, to September 7th of 2016. There is a text at 8:34 a.m. Thank you for blowing that up for the jury to see and for Mr. Cohen to see. Can you read what's in that communication and explain what it is?
This is just the communication from Daniel Rothstein to me stating, please find possible names. And he listed 5 different possible corporation names that he was going to use as the recipient of the assignment agreement.
And what is the date of that first communication that Mr. Rothstein had with you? What date was that?
September 7th of 2016.
And was that just one day after you had taped the conversation with Mr. Trump about setting up an LLC to purchase the information from AMI?
Yes, ma'am.
So you started working with Mr. Rothstein promptly the next day on that matter?
Yes.
Just to clarify something, People's 209 are screenshots or photos of the communications you had with Mr. Rothstein.
It was a screenshot sent to me, yes.
Now, you mentioned an assignment agreement. What is the assignment agreement that he was referencing there?
What he was referencing was to assign the life rights of Karen McDougall to the LLC entity that was being created.
So it would be an assignment from AMI to the company that you set up.
Yes.
Now, if we can scroll down just a little bit. Do you see some additional calls in September following that communication?
Yes.
And then I will just ask you to read the communication on September 30th. And if we can blow that up.
September 30th of 2016 approximately. Well, 1:36 p.m. I will be at your office in a few minutes.
And do you know what that communication was about?
Yes.
What was it?
It was about the assignment agreement.
Was there a plan to sign it on that day?
Yes, ma'am.
We can take that down. Thank you. I want to now show to the witness, Peoples. To the witness, Counsel and the court only. People's Exhibit 210 for identification. Do you recognize that document?
I do.
What do you recognize it to be?
It is an email from Daniel Rothstein to me on September of 2016.
Can we scroll down to the next page of that exhibit? What is attached to that exhibit? Do you recognize it?
I do.
Is it a form assignment of license agreement?
It's a non-filled-in assignment of license agreement.
And other than the redactions that are in the email of redacting email addresses, is this an exact copy of Anne from Mr. Rothstein to you on September 23rd of 2016, attaching that non-filled-in form assignment of licensing agreement?
Yes, ma'am.
I offer People's Exhibit 210 in evidence.
No objection.
210 is accepted into evidence.
Can we display that for the jury now, please? Can we look at that second page? Is that an assignment template agreement that Mr. Rothstein had mentioned in his messages with you earlier on the screenshot exhibit? The screenshot messages?
It is.
Now, did you go ahead? You can take that down. Did you go ahead and form the LLC, the company, that was going to handle the payment to AMI for the life rights to Karen McDougall's story?
Yes.
And at the time, what was the name of the company that you formed to handle that transfer of rights?
Resolution Consultants, LLC.
And can we put up now, just for the witness, counsel, and the court, please, People's Exhibit 215 for identification? Do you recognize this document?
I do.
What do you recognize it to be?
It is an email from Patty, who is an employee over at Delaney Corporate, an entity that incorporates for you, to me with the attachment Resolution Consultants, LLC, and it states this is what I would submit for filing.
And does she attach a certificate of formation for Resolution Consultants to be filed?
Yeah.
Other than some of the redactions to the email, is this an exact copy of the email with the attached certificate of formation for Resolution Consultants that you received from Patty at Delaney Corp? On that day?
It is.
I offer in evidence People's Exhibit 215.
I have no objection.
Accepted into evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. You can show that to the jury now. What is the date of formation of Resolution Consultants, LLC?
September 30th of 2016.
What was your purpose on September 30th, 2016 of forming Resolution Consultants?
To use this entity for the assignment of the McDougall matter as well as the other information.
You can take that down now. Can we now put up People's Exhibit 162, which is in evidence? Do you recognize that document, sir?
I do.
What is that?
This is an executed assignment of licensing agreement between AMI as the signer to Resolution Consultants, LLC, dated September 30th of 2016, and executed by David Pecker and myself.
And that's your signature there?
It is.
And do you recognize David Pecker's signature?
Yes.
Can you just describe for the jury, generally, what were the terms of this assignment agreement?
As it states in the document, for good and valuable consideration, the signer does hereby sign and transfer to the assignee, successors, and assigns all of his rights, benefits, and obligations to the license agreement.
Just in general, without reading it for the jury, there is a lot of legal language in there. Does it represent the transfer of those rights from AMI to Resolution Consultants?
Yes, the transfer of the McDougall life rights as well as the other documents.
Now, why does this agreement reference $125,000 instead of $150,000, which was the payment to Karen McDougall?
So, David had expressed to me that we are going to reduce it from 150 to 125 on the basis that 125 was going to represent the life rights because they were engaged with Karen McDougall for 2 covers, as well as 24 penned articles, that the compensation to her for that was going to be $25,000. That's what they would have on their books claiming their contract with her was for.
Now, at this time, when you worked out this assignment agreement with AMI, between AMI and Resolution Consultants, had you and Alan Weiselberg yet worked out the logistics of where that $125,000 was going to come from?
No.
And who did you understand was, ultimately, going to pay the $125,000 for the life rights to that material?
Mr. Trump.
Were you planning on owning the life rights to that story?
No, ma'am.
Why not?
I had no reason to own, no need to own the life rights. What I was doing at the direction and for the benefit of Mr. Trump.
Now, in signing that agreement, around the time that you signed that agreement with AMI, did you have a conversation with Mr. Trump about doing so?
Yes.
Can we put up, please? You can take that down and put up People's Exhibit 349 and reference the call between Mr. Trump and Mr. Cohen on September 29th of 2016. Do you see a call there, sir, for about 7 minutes and 14 seconds?
Yes.
And what did you discuss? What do you think you discussed on the phone with Mr. Trump during that call?
The Karen McDougall matter.
And did you discuss with him, specifically, Whether you were going to be signing this agreement and finalizing the assignment rights?
Yes, I gave him a complete and total update on everything that transpired the day before.
Why did you speak to him the day before you signed that agreement?
Because it was when I was speaking with David Pecker regarding the transfer and the assignment.
Did you want to let him know that you were getting it done?
Yeah.
Objection.
Sustained.
Why did you speak to him the day before you signed it?
In order to let him know that it was being taken care of, that the matter was going to be resolved, and this conversation, obviously, to let him know that it is being resolved.
You can take that down now. Can you please put up People's Exhibit 161 in evidence? Do you recognize this document, Mr. Cohen?
I do.
What is it?
This is a document. It is, as stated, an invoice from Investor Advisory Services, Inc., with an invoice number of 2016-203, dated September 21st of 2016.
Did you receive this document at some point?
Yes, I did.
Who did you receive it from?
I believe Daniel Rothstein.
What did you understand was the purpose of this document?
The purpose was to reflect $125,000 that was for the assignment.
Was it an invoice for the payment of that $125,000?
Yes, ma'am.
And let me direct your attention to the description of services. It says flat fee for advisory services for $125,000. Do you see that?
I do.
Was that description a truthful description about this transaction?
No, ma'am.
In truth, what was the $125,000 payment supposed to be?
For the life rights of Karen McDougall.
And what's your understanding about why you got an invoice, or why this invoice was from a company called Investment Advisory Services instead of AMI directly?
I never knew who they were. I still, to this day, don't. It was clearly just to create separation in order to mask the transaction.
You can take that down, thank you. Now, ultimately, you signed this assignment agreement and you received this invoice. Ultimately, though, did the company, Resolution Consultants, end up purchasing the Karen McDougall materials and the other materials from AMI?
No.
What happened?
Well, David Pecker contacted me and stated that it was no longer necessary to have Mr. Trump pay the $125,000. I asked him why. Satisfied, because now I would report to Mr. Trump that he wouldn't have to pay that amount of money, which would make him happy. And the reason was because the Karen McDougall front cover on Men's Health magazine had sold more copies than they had not only anticipated, I think that they had ever. The way David expressed it to me, that they had ever sold and they had made a lot of money on that. And that it was no longer necessary because he didn't need to bury the $125,000. He also then had a second cover to use McDougall on, as well as the 24 additional articles that she was. That was going to be penned with her name on it. So he felt that it was, even for the $150,000, it was an excellent business deal.
Did he tell you what to do with that assignment of rights agreement that you had signed?
He did.
What did he tell you to do?
He told me to rip it up. Forget it.
Did you update Mr. Trump after that phone call about what David Pecker had told you about ripping up the agreement?
Yeah.
And what was Mr. Trump's reaction?
It was great.
Why did you understand it was grist?
He doesn't have to pay $125,000 or $150,000.
Did you have some understanding of what might happen to the other materials that you discussed with David Pecker in terms of the locked drawer and the other materials that were out there?
Yes.
What was your conversation or understanding about what would happen with those?
David was not being considered for Time magazine, so he was going to stay at AMI and that there was no need to do any transfer. Plus, he also didn't believe that any of the documents that existed in that locked drawer were detrimental to Mr. Trump.
Now, in total, approximately how many conversations would you estimate you had with Mr. Trump about the purchase of Karen McDougall's account and story?
Quite a few.
And were those conversations on the phone, in person, or both?
Both.
And in total, approximately how many conversations do you think you had with AMI, with David Pecker and Dylan Howard, about the Karen McDougall deal?
Also a substantial amount.
By the way, did you ever play for Mr. Pecker the recorded conversation that you had with Mr. Trump, where he said he understood that he would have to pay the $150,000?
No.
Why not?
He didn't ask me to. I had told him that I had spoken to Mr. Trump and that he is going to do it. I told him I could, but I just never played it.
In other words, withdrawn. After the conversation you had with Mr. Trump that you taped on September 6th of 2016, did you move promptly ahead the next day with Daniel Rothstein to finalize the agreements then?
Yes.
Was there any need to play that recording for Mr. Pecker?
No.
I would like to direct your attention now to October 7th of 2016. Do you remember where you were on that day?
Yes.
Where were you?
I was in London.
How do you remember that you were in London?
Well, I went to London for my daughter's 21st birthday, as well as for my anniversary.
And while you were in London, did you become aware of the release of what's known as the Access Hollywood tape?
Yes.
And how did you become aware of that tape coming out or that it had come out?
I received a phone call.
Who did you receive a phone call from?
From Hope Hicks.
Who was Hope Hicks at the time?
Hope Hicks was communication director for the Trump campaign.
Do you also recall receiving, at around that time, an email from Steve Bannon about the potential release of the Access Hollywood tape?
Yeah.
And who was Steve Bannon at the time?
Campaign manager for the Trump campaign.
Did you have Mr. Bannon's email and contact information in your phone?
Yes, ma'am.
Can we take a look now, please? Just for the witness, counsels, and the court, People's Exhibit 218. Do you recognize this email?
I do.
And who is this an email between you and someone else?
This is an email between me and Steve Bannon, as well as Hope Hicks, Jason Miller, Kellyanne Conway, Dave Bossy.
Was this an email that was forwarded to you from Steve Bannon?
Yes.
Does it relate to the release of the Access Hollywood tape?
It does.
And is it a true and accurate copy of the email and the forwarding of the information from Steve Bannon to you?
Yes, ma'am.
I offer in evidence now the rest of People's 218. Part of it was previously in evidence, now the entire exhibit.
Just the same objection before.
Noted. Accepted into evidence.
Can you can put that up on the screen. Can we start at the bottom of the email, which would be the earliest email? And can you tell the jury what you understand this bottom email to be?
Yes, this is an email from David Farenthold of the Washington Post dated Friday, October 7th, 2016 at 1:29 p.m., and it's to Hope Hicks with the subject matter of urgent Washington Post query.
And just in general, what is he communicating to Hope Hicks, and what is he asking her for?
He is asking her for comment in regard to the leak of the tape from Access Hollywood.
And is there a transcript of the Access Hollywood tape attached to the email from David Farenthold to Hope Hicks?
There is?
And is David Farenthold in that email asking for some comments from Hope Hicks?
Yes, ma'am.
And does Hope Hicks then forward that email to some other folks?
She does.
And who does she forward it to?
She sends it to Jason Miller, David Bossy, Kellyanne Conway, and Steve Bannon.
What were those people's roles at the time?
All of them had roles at the Trump campaign.
And then, following, what does Hope Hicks say in that email that she forwards on to those folks involved in the campaign?
Need to hear the tape to be sure, then followed by deny, deny, deny.
And does that get forwarded? Now, as we scroll down, does that now get forwarded by Mr. Bannon onto you?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you read? Or if you can blow it up. Thank you. Mr. Cohen email to Steve Bannon saying, please call me?
Call me.
And why did you ask Mr. Bannon to call you?
Because I wanted to ensure that things were being properly taken care of in order to protect Mr. Trump.
And can we scroll up to the next email by Mr. Cohen when he asks about damage control? Can you read your email, Mr. Cohen?
Yes, ma'am. Again, it's from me to Steve Bannon, October 7th, urgent Washington Post query. And my statement to him, my text to him, it's all over the place. Who is doing damage control here?
Why is it that you asked that of Mr. Bannon?
In order to protect Mr. Trump?
Were you concerned about the impact of what this tape may have on Mr. Trump's campaign?
Yes.
Thank you. You can take that down. Now, on October 8th, you were still in London, is that right?
That's correct.
And while you were in London, did you have several calls with Hope Hicks about this matter? The Access Hollywood tape?
I did.
And some other matters as well?
Correct.
Did you have her cell phone information in your contacts as well?
I did.
And you used that to communicate with her?
Yes, ma'am.
At one point, did Mr. Trump join a call with yourself and Hope Hicks?
Yes.
On that day, on October 8th?
Yes.
And did you also have another separate call with Mr. Trump on October 8th of 20167?
Yes.
Let's put up People's Exhibit 349, please. And the two calls between Michael Cohen and Mr. Trump on August 16th, 10. Does that accurately reflect the two calls that you had with Mr. Trump on the evening of October 8th of 2016?
It does.
And do you remember? Do you have a separate memory of where you were and what you were doing when you had these phone calls with him?
Yes.
What were you doing?
I was with my family and friends in London.
London. Were you having dinner?
I was.
Did you step out to take these calls?
I did.
And what, if any, discussion do you remember with Mr. Trump about the Access Hollywood tape and the strategy for dealing with it?
He wanted me to reach out to all of my contacts with the media. We needed to put a spin on this. And the spin that he wanted put on it was that this is locker room talk, something that Melania had recommended, or at least he told me that that's what Melania had thought it was, and used that in order to get control over the story and to minimize its impact on him and his campaign.
And what, if anything, did you do at that point to try to assist the campaign with that effort?
I reached out to members of the media.
And, in addition, When you say you reached out to members in the media, did you have conversations with them?
I did.
Along the lines of the conversations of how to minimize the impact?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
You mentioned that you reached out to the press. Did members of the press also reach out to you?
Yes,
And did you have conversations with the press about this matter?
I did.
What was your understanding about why the press reached out to you about this?
Well, some and substance of the recording is quite damaging and they wanted comment.
And were you somebody that they fairly frequently came to and asked for comment on matters related to Mr. Trump?
Yes.
Can we now please show? Can we take that down and show People's Exhibit 257 in evidence? And can we blow up the communications, the texts, on October 8th of 2016? First, Mr. Cohen, do you recognize these texts?
I do.
Who are they with?
These are text communications between myself and Chris Cuomo. At the time, he was an anchor journalist with CNN.
And did you have his cell phone number in your contacts?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you use that number to communicate with him by phone or text?
Yes,
And do you recall these texts with Mr. Cuomo at the time?
I do.
Can I direct your attention? I think we have them up, actually. The 5 texts on October 8th, 2016. Could you read them, please, for the jury?
Yes, ma'am. On October and 2016, I received a text message from Chris Cuomo stating, "You going to defend him?" I then responded back, "I am in London," to which I think I also stated, "I have been asked by everyone to do shows starting Tuesday." And Tuesday was when I would be back in New York. I then followed through and said, "Not sure what I will do." And Chris Cuomo's comment back to me, "Will be too late. He is dying right now." And by he meant. He was referring to Mr. Trump.
What was your understanding about what that meant, that he is dying right now?
That this is a tremendously negative story in regard to the Trump campaign.
And about how long before the election was this at that time?
Approximately a month.
And was this one example of some communications you had at the time with members of the press about the Access Hollywood tape?
Yes, ma'am.
What did you understand as a result of those communications and others about the impact of the Access Hollywood tape on the campaign?
Objection.
Sustained as to form. Please rephrase.
Did you have an understanding at the time, based on all of these communications, about the potential impact of the Access Hollywood tape on Mr. Trump's campaign?
Objection.
Overruled.
Yet.
What was your understanding?
That this was going to be significantly impactful, especially with women voters.
Thank you. You can take that down. Can we now put up People's Exhibit 167 in evidence? Do you recognize this email?
I do.
Can you explain? First, tell us who the email is with, who it's between, and what it is about.
So this is an email from Dylan Howard on October 8th, 2016 to me with a CC to David Pecker. The subject line is link. It says evening. The only story was this posted in October of 2006 before AMI owned it. And he is referring to the old Radar magazine. The tape was not part of the story that existed online. I suggest it would have been lost during the many site changes over the years. Nevertheless, I have deleted the text story. It no longer exists. And he attaches a hyperlink of that story.
Tell the jury what that's about, if you can flush that out a little bit.
The title of it was Donald Trump, Playboy Man, and it talks about the audio clip, recorded phone conversation between Trump and gossip Chauncey Hayden, stating that it provides some glimpse into just how exacting the real estate blowhard standards are regarding women.
So let me ask you a question. Did you learn at some point that there was this article called Donald Trump, Playboy Man on Radar Online?
I did.
Who owned Radar Online?
At the time, I didn't know. At the time I made the communication, it was AMI in control of David Pecker.
And when you found out about this article being up on Radar Online, did you ask David Pecker or Dylan Howard to do something about it?
Yes, ma'am.
What did you ask them to?
Immediately take it down.
Why did you ask them to take it down?
Because it was negative to Mr. Trump. It would impact the campaign.
Were you concerned about the release of this information in particular because of the release of the Access Hollywood tape?
Yes.
And so, you said Dylan Howard, as referenced here, took the article down, is that right?
That's correct.
And did you update Mr. Trump to let him know that that article had been taken down?
I did.
Do you believe that you communicated that to him in one of the phone calls you had with him on October 8th of 2016?
Yes.
And why did you tell him?
I told him again, so he would know that the task or the situation has been handled, to get credit for it, because here I am in London with my family for 2 important events. My daughter's 21, my anniversary, and I wanted David Pecker to get credit as well.
Thank you. You can take that down. Now, do you recall having several calls in the evening of October 8th with David Pecker and also with Dylan Howard?
Yes.
Did you have a number of calls with them that night?
Yes.
Do you recall what was discussed with each of them in general that night?
The Access Hollywood tape,
And was it discussed also the Playboy online article?
as well as the Playboy.
Did there also come a time that night where one of them indicated to you that a woman named Stormy Daniels was out looking to sell her story publicly?
Yes, that conversation came up as well.
Did that come up with Dylan Howard?
I believe it was Dylan Howard.
Now, did you know at the time when he advised you about that about who Stormy Daniels was?
I am sorry?
That's okay. I will say it one more time. When Dylan Howard told you on the evening of October 8th of 2016 that Stormy Daniels was out looking, well, her manger was out looking to sell her story. Did you know who Stormy Daniels was at that time?
I did.
How did you know who she was?
Because it referenced back to the 2011 scenario that I had dealt previously with David Pecker on, with Keith Davidson on, in order to have a story removed from with Mr. Trump about Stormy Daniels? Yes.
Can you tell us in general the gist of that conversation?
After I received the information from Dylan Howard, I immediately went to Mr. Trump's office, knocked on the door, said, "Boss, I got to speak to you." And I told him about the conversation, the sum and substance of the conversation that I just had with Dylan Howard. And I asked him if he knew who she was. He told me that he did. And I stated about the story that existed on the dirty.com, that they had a relationship that occurred during a golf outing going back to like 2006. And I told him that one of the things that, we need to do is we need to obviously take care of it. We need to absolutely do it, take care of it.
Did he also tell you about meeting her?
Objection.
Did Mr. Trump also tell you anything about having met her at the golf tournament back in 2006?
Yeah.
What did he tell you?
He told me that he was playing golf with Big Ben Roethlisberger, the football player, and they had met Stormy Daniels and others there. But she liked Mr. Trump, that women prefer Trump even over someone like Big Ben.
And did you ask him at that time in 2011 whether he had sexual encounter with Stormy Daniels?
I did.
Did he answer you directly?
No, ma'am.
What did he say? Did he say anything in response to that?
No, ma'am.
Did he mention anything about what she looked like?
He said she was a beautiful woman.
Let me go back to your conversations with Mr. Davidson about taking that article down from the dirty.com. Did you also have some conversations with the General Counsel of Life and Style about what he might do if that article wasn't taken down?
Yes, ma'am.
What was the substance of that conversation?
I would file an immediate lawsuit against him.
Ultimately, when you and Keith Davidson were able to get that article down and to make sure. Actually, let me withdraw and go back. The General Counsel you spoke to at Life and Style, were they involved in putting out another article at around that time, separate from the dirty.com?
Yes.
And those conversations were about that separate article, meaning In Touch magazine, and making sure that it didn't come out in that magazine?
Correct.
Thank you. After you succeeded in making sure that the In Touch article didn't come out, and Keith Davidson was working to take down the article on the dirty.com, did you update Mr. Trump to let him know that it had been taken care of?
I did, and gave the credit actually in that case to Keith Davidson, who was the one who filed and sent papers to the dirty.com to have it removed.
As a result of your efforts and Keith Davidson's efforts, did that article, either article in 2011, get any traction in 2011, meaning, was it out there much?
No, ma'am.
So, let me now move past 2011. Between that and 2011 and 2016, when you found out from Dylan Howard that Stormy Daniels' story had resurfaced again, in between that time, had you heard anything more about the Stormy Daniels matter?
Nothing.
Now, when you learned on October 8th from Dylan Howard that the Stormy Daniels story had resurfaced, did you also learn from Mr. Howard that there was an attorney who would be representing Stormy Daniels in the matter?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
Keith Davidson, he was going to be representing Stormy Daniels.
And was that the same lawyer who had represented her in 2011 that you worked with?
Yes, we had obviously a positive result.
So let me ask to please put up again 177A, Mr. Cohen's texts with Dylan Howard. Can you take a look at the texts on October 9th, 2016?
Yes.
Actually, if you are able to, on these texts, could you read them to the jury, please?
I'm sorry?
Could you read these to the jury?
Yes.
Are these all dated on October 9th, 2016?
Yes.
If you would read them to the jury.
This is from Dylan Howard to me stating, emailed you. Then he also forwarded a second one stating, Keith will do it. Let's reconvene tomorrow.
Who did you understand Keith to be?
Keith Davidson.
Continue if you would, please.
Then I responded back to him. Thank you. Followed it then by another text communication advising that Resolution Consultants LLC, the name of the entity that I formed a week ago, to which I then responded again. Whenever you wake, please call my cell, because of the difference in the time zone.
Now, why did you tell Mr. Howard that you had formed Resolution Consultants, an entity, just the week before?
So that would be the name of the entity that we would use in order to purchase the life rights to the Stormy Daniels matter.
Thank you. You can take that down. Did you return to New York from London on approximately October 10th, 2016?
I did.
And did you have some further text communications with Keith Davidson and Dylan Howard on that date?
Yeah.
Let's put up 178A, please. And specifically, I believe there are 2 texts. If we can float up a little so Mr. Cohen can read them. Now, who are these texts between or among?
So, from Dylan Howard to me on Monday, October 10th, and it states, Keith Michael, connecting you both in regards to that business opportunity. Spoke to the client this AM, and they're confirmed to proceed with the opportunity. Thanks, Dylan.
Let me ask you, is that a 3-way text or a 2-way text? In other words, yourself and Dylan Howard, is there anybody else on that text?
Yes, Keith Davidson.
So is it a text from Dylan Howard to both yourself and Keith Davidson?
Yes.
Okay. Can you also read Dylan Howard's next text communication to both yourself and Keith Davidson?
So Dylan Howard sends to both myself and Keith Davidson. Over to you two, meaning that the 2 of us should just speak independent.
What did you understand to be the business opportunity that Mr. Howard was referring to?
The business opportunity was the acquisition of the life rights of Stormy Daniels.
Now you can take that down. Thank you. Can we now show People's Exhibit 337 and highlight the call between Mr. Cohen and Keith Davidson on October 10th, 2016? I believe there are 2 calls referenced there. Now, after Dylan Howard confirmed that Keith Davidson would be representing Stormy Daniels, did you reach out and speak with Keith Davidson by phone?
I did.
And from this point on, did you speak a great deal with Mr. Davidson about purchasing the life rights to Stormy Daniels' story?
Yes.
You can take that down. Thank you. Now, after you learned from Dylan Howard and from Keith Davidson about the Stormy Daniels story, and her wanting to publish that story and the conversations about purchasing that story, did you speak to Mr. Trump?
I did.
Can you tell us? First of all, why did you speak to Mr. Trump about it?
Because it was a matter that affected him, and because that was what I always did, which was to keep him abreast of everything.
Was this also a serious matter at that time?
A very serious matter.
Did you tell him what you had heard from Dylan Howard and Keith Davidson?
Yes.
And what was his reaction?
He was really angry with me. I thought you had this under control. I thought you took care of this. I expressed to Mr. Trump, we did, 2011. I have no control over what she goes out and does. And he expressed to me, there is previous denial. Just take care of it. There was a lot going on at the campaign at the time. He was like, just take care of it.
Did he say anything to you at that time about how this might be viewed if it got out?
Yes.
What did he say in substance?
He said to me, this is a disaster, total disaster. Women are going to hate me because this is really a disaster. Women will hate me. Guys may think it's cool, but this is going to be a disaster for the campaign.
What, if anything, did you understand about withdrawn? Why did you understand? What did you understand him to mean by women will hate this, and what his concern was?
Objection.
Overruled.
So at the time, Mr. Trump was polling very, very low with women and...
You said very well?
No, very poorly. I'm sorry.
It's all right. I couldn't hear.
He was polling very poorly with women, and this, coupled with the previous Access Hollywood tape, he just stated, this is a disaster, and get control over it.
Did you have any conversation with him about strategy in dealing with the story?
I am sorry.
Did you have any additional conversation with Mr. Trump about a particular strategy about how to get control of it and how to deal with it?
He told me to work with David and get control over this, purchase the life rights. We need to stop this from getting out.
Was there any conversation about pushing it to a period of time?
Yes.
What was that?
So, during the negotiation to purchase and acquire the life rights, what he had said to me is, what I want you to do is just push it out as long as you can. Just get past the election, because if I win, it has no relevance. I will be president. If I lose, I don't even care.
Did you bring up at the time the topic of his wife Melania in one of those conversations with Mr. Trump?
I did.
What did you say in substance to him?
I said to him, and how's things going to go with upstairs?
Were you concerned about that?
I was.
And what, if anything, did he say to you about that?
Don't worry, he goes, how long do you think I will be on the market for? Not long.
What did you understand that to mean?
He wasn't thinking about Melania. This was all about the campaign.
Now, those conversations that you had with Mr. Trump, were they in person, on the phone, or both?
Both.
Now, can we put up now, please, People's 63 in evidence? Can you blow up the body of the email so that Mr. Cohen can read it? Do you recognize this email, Mr. Cohen?
This is from Keith Davidson to me on October 11th.
What year?
2016. And it says, Michael, please find Ms. Daniels' settlement agreement and side letter agreement attached. I have not filled in the side letter agreement, SLA, which identifies the parties to this agreement. Under the terms of the agreement, neither my client or I are entitled to possession of the SLA. Settlement sum is $130,000. I have also attached my wiring instructions for your reference. Ms. Daniels expressed dissatisfaction with your schedule of the delay of 10 days for funding. To that end, you will see that I placed this Friday, October 14th of 2016, as the funding deadline. Let me know if this is a problem. Let me know you have any questions or concerns about anything. Keith?
Let me ask you to blow up the top of the email, which shows the to's and froms. Did you receive this email at your Trump Organization email address?
I did.
Now, this email that you received, which can we scroll down, does this contain an attachment? Does this contain the settlement agreement and the side letter agreement that was referenced?
Yes.
And does this agreement at this point contain the signatures of Ms. Daniels and Mr. Davidson, but no signatures on your side yet?
Correct.
So the date of this email, if we can go back to the email again for a moment, is October 11th? Is that right, of 2016?
Yes.
Is that just a few days after the release of the Access Hollywood tape?
Yes.
By October 11th of 2016, had you and Keith Davidson already agreed in principle to the terms of this agreement?
Yes.
And you had some discussions about how much would need to be paid to Stormy Daniels for this agreement by that date. Had you arranged a number?
Yes, ma'am.
And tell us just in general the terms of that agreement on this date.
For the sum of $130,000 that Ms. Daniels would execute a non-disclosure agreement, that the Life Right story would never come out, that she wouldn't speak of it. And
was there a breach provision, an amount, a liquid amount?
yes, there was a very large $1 million per violation liquid punitive damages. It was a clause that we put in where she would owe at that point in time, the LLC that was going to do it, she would owe them $1 million per violation.
Whose idea was it to have that $1 million, as you say, punitive damage provision in the contract?
It was mine.
What was the point of that?
To ensure that she didn't speak. Not only that, there was also a provision in there that she disclose who she had told the story to, and they were included in the agreement.
There was a list of names that were included in the agreement?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, the email mentions a side letter agreement. That is also one of the attachments here. What was the purpose of the side letter agreement that is referenced here?
The side letter agreement would be a one-page document that indicates pseudonym names that we were going to use in the non-disclosure agreement. And the purpose of that is, if somehow the non-disclosure agreement got out, having the names Peggy Peterson or David Dennison would have no meaning to anyone.
And so, would the side letter agreement be a key to who those names are really related to?
Yes, I was the only one that would have that one page.
And explain why you were the only one that was going to hold on to that side letter agreement, which indicated the true names of the people involved in the agreement?
In that way, I was the only one. There is no way for it to be released, and the information would never get out.
Now, you said that, I think by this date, neither you, obviously, or Mr. Trump had signed this agreement by that date.
No, ma'am.
Why hadn't you signed it at that point?
Because during my conversations with Mr. Trump, it was again about delaying the deal and trying to push it past the election, which was upcoming.
Now, in the email, Mr. Davidson says that Ms. Daniels had expressed some dissatisfaction with your schedule delay of 10 days for funding. What was he referring to about your schedule of delay of 10 days for funding?
Well, he wanted an immediate wire transfer, and I expressed to him I would need 10 days in order to fund the transaction. I would have waited to the 10th day and do it again, which is what I was instructed to do, push it past the election date.
So you could have funded it earlier, but you tried to push it off with the additional 10 days. Is that right?
I was following directions.
So at this point, he is asking for a funding deadline of October 14th. Is that correct?
Yes.
And were you intending at that point to make that deadline of October 14th?
No, ma'am.
What were you going to try to do?
Delay it.
Your Honor, do you want me to continue?
Is this a good time to break?
It's up to you. It's perfectly fine.
Jurors, I will remind you of all of my instructions, including that you not discuss this case either among yourselves or with anyone else. Please continue to keep an open mind as to the defendant's guilt or innocence. Please do not form or express an opinion as to defendant's guilt or innocence. I will see you at 2 o'clock. Enjoy your lunch. You may be seated. Sir, you can step down. Is there anything that we need to go over?
No, Your Honor.
No.
Okay, I will see you at 2. Good afternoon. Can we get the witness, Mr. Cohen? Get the jury, please. Please be seated.
Case on trial continued. All jurors are present and properly seated. Ms. Hoffinger.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Cohen.
Good afternoon.
When we left off, we were talking a little bit about the funding deadline for the payoff of the Stormy Daniels NDA. Do you remember that?
I do.
Let's put up now for everybody what is in evidence as People's Exhibit 64. Do you recognize these emails with Keith Davidson?
I do.
Were they received and sent from your Trump Organization email address?
This is from Keith Davidson to me, dated October 12th, 2016.
Can you read the emails for the jury, please?
Yes, not necessary to speak today. You should have all the executed documents a few days ago. Talk to you tomorrow.
Is there another email below that?
Yes. This is my response to Keith Davidson. Yes, it's Yom Kippur, so the office is for all purposes closed. I'm in today, but can speak for the next 3 hours via cell necessary.
Just to orient the jury, was that the first email, the one at the bottom, and the response by Keith Davidson at the top?
Yes, then it is followed by Keith Davidson to me. We good.
So what was happening at this time?
Continue to delay. Delay the execution of the documents. Continue the delay of execution of funding. In this specific case, I used the holiday of Yom Kippur as a way of just once again trying to delay it, which is until after the election.
And the reason for that?
Because after the election, it wouldn't matter.
And according to who?
According to Mr. Trump.
Now, around this time, the middle of October or so, did you have some more conversations with Mr. Trump about Keith Davidson pushing for payment around this time?
Yes.
And what was his response?
I mean, I'm incredibly busy right now. There's a lot going on. I'm traveling all over. I don't have time to think about this right now. Just give me a few days.
And did you have those conversations with him sometimes by telephone and sometimes in person?
Yes, ma'am.
When you called him, did you sometimes use your cell, sometimes use your landline phone at the Trump Organization?
Yes, ma'am.
You said he was traveling a lot. Was this the time when he was campaigning for the presidency?
Yes.
And in terms of his schedule during October, how did he travel in terms of for the campaign?
With his own private plane.
Was he still sometimes in the office during that time, even when he was campaigning?
Yes.
During what time? Did you sometimes see him in the office during those times?
Sometimes.
Do you recall, was it at various times that he might be back in the office?
Yes. It depended upon the schedule of the rallies that were taking place all around the country.
So, is it fair you spoke to him in person when you were able to see him? If not, you spoke to him by telephone?
When possible.
Let's show People's 363 in evidence. And can we scroll down and see if there is an attachment on this email? I think there may be a couple of pages. Scroll down. What, if anything, did you send according to this exhibit? What did you send him?
I sent him the corporate documents for Resolution Consultants LLC to open a bank account.
And now, can we go back to the email, please? And can you go to the top email, which is Gary Farrow's email to someone else at First Republic Bank? Can you read that?
This is an email from Gary Farrow, dated same date, October 13th of 2016, to Aliva Casson, who was a banker at First Republic. It states, need an account opened for Michael Cohen immediately. He wants no address on the checks. Call me now to discuss.
So, mid-October, now why are you reaching out to Gary Farrow to set up an account for Resolution Consultants?
In the event of the need for an account to be opened to transfer the funds.
Is it what you anticipated? What you believed might need to happen soon?
Yes.
Can we take that down? Put up People's 364 in evidence? Can we blow up the email a little bit? Can you tell us what this email is?
It's an email from Aliva Casson, again, First Republic Bank to me, and CC to Gary Farrow regarding account paperwork for Resolution Consultants.
If we can scroll down, is she sending you something?
Yes.
What is she sending you?
An attachment of the paperwork that is needed in which to establish the bank account.
So, are these various pages of opening account records with information filled in for you to review?
Yes, ma'am.
Can we put up? Were you familiar with the account opening paperwork at First Republic Bank?
Yes.
And had you other accounts there and set up other accounts there?
Multiple.
Can we now put up People's 366 in evidence? What is this email, Mr. Cohen?
It's an email from me to Olivia regarding the paperwork.
Can we take a look at the attachments to that email? Maybe we can scroll down a little bit. Thank you. So, what are you sending back Olivia Casson now in the email?
The documents necessary to open up the bank account.
Had you signed them according to these attachments?
I did.
Let's take a look at a few places in this paperwork. Can we go to page 5 of the PDF entitled Business Information Form Overview? Is the description of what Resolution Consultants is here in the paperwork?
Yes.
Can you read that?
It states, please include product of services provided, typical customers, suppliers, etc. It says, Resolution Consultants, LLC is a consulting firm. Michael Cohen provides individuals and businesses, financial services, law firms, technology firms, etc., advice on strategy, PR marketing, best practices and procedures, etc. All of his clients are in the United States of America.
Can we also take a look at page 9 of the PDF? That is NAICS business description?
Yes.
And can you read the description there of the business?
So the NAICS code is 541611. The business description is management consulting, including HR and marketing.
Can we finally look at the NAICS? Actually, we already read that. Let me ask you, Mr. Cohen, did you sign these documents at page 3? Let's show page 3 of the PDF. Did you sign that?
I did.
On what date?
October 13th, 2016.
Can we take a look at page of the signature block? Did you sign it there as well?
Yeah.
What is the date on there?
Same date, October 13th, 2016.
Were the descriptions in the account paperwork that we just read, were they truthful as of the date that you opened the account?
No.
Why didn't you give FRB the true reason for your opening the account?
Well, I'm not sure they would have opened it if it stated to pay off. To pay off an adult film star for a non-disclosure agreement.
You understood that, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever end up finalizing the account for the bank account for Resolution Consultants, LLC?
No, ma'am.
What happened?
I realized that during the process, I couldn't remember why I even called it Resolution Consultants. Then it dawned on me that it's actually the name of a company of somebody who I know who happens to be out of state. I didn't think he would appreciate if I had used the same name as his company.
Did you end up, when you ultimately opened the account at FRB, did you use a different name of a different company?
I did.
And what name was that?
I transferred it. I made it to Essential Consultants, LLC.
You filled out similar paperwork at FRB for the Essential Consultants account?
Yes.
Also with false descriptions of the purpose of the account.
The same information.
Thank you very much. You can take that down. Can we now put up People's 281 in evidence? What is the date of this email and who is it from and who?
It's to me from Keith Davidson, dated Monday, October 17th, 2016. And the subject is PP, which is for Peggy Peterson versus DD, David Dennison / important.
Can you read the email?
It states, Michael, I have been charged by my client with forwarding the below message. We have a written settlement agreement which calls for settlement payment to be sent by the end of business this past Friday, October 14th, 2016. No payment was received. We spoke on Friday, October 14th, and you stated that funds would be wired today, October 17th, 2016. No funds have been received as of the sending of this email. My client informs me that she intends to cancel the settlement contract if no funds are received by 5 PST today. Please call me if you have any questions. Keith?
What was happening at this time with respect to the deal?
My intent was to continue to delay it as per Mr. Trump's demand, and I clearly did not send funds to Mr. Davidson at this Iola lawyer's account on this date.
On this date?
On this date.
Can we take that down and put up People's 282 in evidence? If we can blow it up a little bit. Can you tell us who this email is from and to and the date?
This is from Keith Davidson to me, same date of October 17th, 2016, 1:31 p.m., regarding same matter, PP versus DD. Important. And it states, please be advised that my client deems her settlement agreement canceled and void ab initio. Please further be advised that I no longer represent her in this or any matter.
What did you understand was happening now in terms of this email?
We were losing control over the settlement of this agreement in order to prevent the story from coming out. That as a direct result of my failure to wire funds, that Keith Davidson was no longer going to be acting as Stormy Daniels' counsel in this matter.
And were you concerned?
Very much so.
Thank you. You can take that down. Please put up People's 177A in evidence. Focus on from the texts from Dylan Howard on October 17th, 2016, page 3.
Yes.
Can you read to the jury this text? This is the text you received from Dylan Howard on that same date, October 17th, 2016.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you read that?
It's from Dylan Howard to me. It states, I'm told they're going with Daily Mail. Are you aware?
What did you understand the they were in this email?
Stormy Daniels.
And can we blow up the next text communication after this? Can you read for the jury the rest of the text communications on October 17th, 2016?
From me to Dylan Howard. Call me. Then I responded back with 3 question marks because I hadn't heard back. This was obviously incredibly stressful and incredibly important. I finally receive a response back from Dylan Howard, not taking my calls. And he was referencing there Keith Davidson. He's not talking my calls. The goal is to figure out exactly what was going on and what else could be done. I then respond from me to Dylan. You're kidding. Then I continue by saying, who are you trying to reach? I wanted just to confirm that my suspicion that he was trying to reach Keith Davidson and not maybe somebody else. To which he responds thereafter, the agent. The agent I knew to be Keith Davidson.
Now, did you also speak by telephone that day with Dylan Howard?
Yes, ma'am.
And why did you speak with him by telephone?
This was of grave importance.
What, if anything, did you understand at this point about whether Stormy Daniels might end up in the Daily Mail?
That's what we were told, and that's what I relayed to Mr. Trump.
And so, let's put up now People's 349 in evidence. And let's blow up the call on October 17th, 2016 at 5 p.m. between Michael Cohen and Mr. Trump. Do you see a call there?
I do.
Who called who?
I called Mr. Trump.
And why did you call him?
In order to advise him of this situation, that because I didn't forward the funds, she's now declared the agreement void, and that we were not going to be in a position to delay it post the election, which is what he wanted me to do, and that the matter was going to. The story was going to go to the Daily Mail.
That was your intention in making the call.
Yes.
Do you notice it's just about 8 seconds on that call? What do you think happened with that call?
I received a voicemail.
Did you receive a voicemail?
I spoke to the voicemail.
So you left a voicemail?
I left a voicemail.
For Mr. Trump. Okay. Did you believe at this time you could continue to delay the transaction?
No.
We can take that down. Thank you. Let's show, please, People's 369 in evidence. Do you recognize that, Mr. Cohen?
I do.
What is it?
This is a filing receipt for the state of Delaware in the formation of Essential Consultants, LLC.
Did you set up the Essential Consultants, LLC on that date, October 17th?
I did.
Why did you go ahead and do it on that date?
Because I wanted to make sure that, again, I had a vehicle within which to transfer funds to Keith Davidson to lock down the story.
Thank you very much. Can you take that down? Can we now put up People's 216 for identification? Can you take it down? Just to the witness, the court, and the parties. So it's 216 for identification. Do you recognize what is on the screen?
I do.
What is it?
This is from Patty over at Delaney Corp. That's the company that incorporates on October 24th, 2016. It's an invoice stating, here is the invoice to cancel the old LLC and file the new LLC, meaning I was closing out resolution and incorporating Essential Consultants.
On what date did you close out resolution and open up Essential Consultants?
I believe it was that day.
Which date was that?
The 24th.
Can we take a look?
I think it was the 17th.
I offer that in evidence, People's 216.
No objection.
Received into evidence.
Can we look at page 2 of the invoice? Does the email show the date you canceled Resolution Consultants?
The 17th of October, 2016.
Can we now put up People's 249 in evidence and blow it up a little bit? You mentioned on October 17th you left a voicemail for Mr. Trump. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you recognize what this record is?
Yes.
What is it?
This is a text message on October 18th, 2016 from Melania to me.
Can you read what it says?
Good morning, Michael. Can you please call DT on his cell? Thanks. And DT, of course, references Donald Trump.
What time was that text?
That text is at 8:53 a.m.
Do you respond by text?
I do.
What is your response? Of course. What time is that response?
8:54.
Do you believe that you spoke to Mr. Trump after Mrs. Trump asked you to reach out to him and call him?
Yes.
Is that dated October 18th, 2016?
It is.
Was that a work day, do you know?
I believe it is.
And were you usually at work by that time, 8:53 a.m. in the morning?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you believe that you called Mr. Trump using your landline at the Trump Organization?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I would. So we're now talking about October 18th, 2016, and I would like to ask you, on that day or that evening, did you make an appearance on Wolf Blitzer's show on CNN that night?
I did.
Why did you do that?
In order to respond to a series of topics that affected Mr. Trump and the campaign.
And did you tell Mr. Trump that you were going on CNN?
Yes.
And were you going on as a support to the campaign to try to talk about his priorities?
Yes, as a surrogate.
And you said that was to deflect from some other news that was out there?
Correct.
And without providing us with any details or elaborating, were you asked by Wolf Blitzer to respond a number of times to questions about reports of Mr. Trump's behavior with women?
Yes.
And did you steer the conversation as best you could towards his presidential policies?
Objection.
Sustained.
What, if anything, did you do during that interview?
I advocated for Mr. Trump in the best light possible. denials as well as exclamations that I have never seen him act in this sort of manner before. I was doing everything that could within which to change the direction of the comments.
And you had some talking points for the campaign, talking points about Mr. Trump's priorities to deliver on that show.
I received regular talking points from the campaign.
Do you believe you received some that night as well?
I do.
Did you try to emphasize those talking points as well?
Yes, ma'am.
What, if any, additional pressure did you feel to close this deal with Stormy Daniels as a result?
Well, because the Daily Mail was in play and they were anxious to sell the story.
Did there come a time after that, again, still in October of 2016, that Mr. Trump, in substance, expressed to you that he understood he could no longer delay this transaction?
Yes.
And describe that conversation that you had with him.
He stated to me that he had spoken to some friends, some individuals, very smart people, and that it's $130,000. You're like a billionaire. Just pay it. There's no reason to keep this thing out there. So do it. And he expressed to me, just do it. Go meet up with Alan Weiselberg and figure this whole thing out.
Following that conversation with Mr. Trump, did you in fact have some discussions with Alan Weiselberg about trying to figure out how the payment would be made?
Yes.
And what in substance did you discuss with Weiselberg and the different options?
Well, that I had the opening of the company all set up. Now it just needed to be funded. To which Weiselberg turned and said, can we get AMI to pay it? I said, no. They've already expressed to me they're not paying it. They said we need to come up with a way how to fund it. I said, we need to do it immediately.
What options did Mr. Weiselberg discuss with you?
One option was to see whether I knew anybody who wanted to purchase a golf membership at one of the various golf courses, or possibly somebody who was having a family affair, like a wedding or bar mitzvah, that would be interested in paying the money there and taking it as credit off of their invoice, or maybe even just running it through one of the golf courses.
Was he suggesting it would be a vehicle to use that money to pay this?
Yes.
And what, if anything, did you discuss about those options?
Obviously, that wasn't a possibility because each of those entities has a Trump name attached to it, and the whole purpose was to ensure that Trump name in no way was disclosed in this non-disclosure agreement.
Did you suggest to Mr. Weiselberg about him funding it?
I did.
Objection.
Overruled.
I stated to Alan, you're the CFO. You're making 7 figures. Why don't you pay it? You'll get paid back. You don't have to worry about that one.
What did he say?
He said to me he wasn't financially in a position to do it. He stated, Michael, as you know, I have my 4 grandkids at prep school and that I have summer camps for them that I am paying for. I just can't do it.
What did you resolve between the two of you, yourself and Weiselberg, ultimately?
Well, because of the urgency that was happening and the fact she was heading, or at least they expressed to me they were heading to the Daily Mail, I ultimately said, okay, I'll pay it.
Was there any discussion at that time with Mr. Weiselberg about you getting paid back eventually?
Yes.
What was discussed?
Don't worry about it. I will make sure you get paid back.
At some point, did you have a conversation with Mr. Trump about the fact that you were willing to pay for it, at least initially?
Yes, Alan and I spoke to Mr. Trump. We expressed to him that I was going to front the money for it, to which he was appreciative and good.
Did you have a sense from Mr. Trump that you would end up being out the money or you would get paid back?
He stated about it. Don't worry about it. You will get the money back.
Would you have ever paid for the NDA for Stormy Daniels on your own without an understanding that you would get paid back?
No.
Why not?
It's $130,000. I was doing everything that I could and more in order to protect my boss, which was something I had done for a long time. But I would not lay out $130,000 for an NDA needed by somebody else.